little bit of our history. We're going to be 110 years old. And it's interesting, back in 1903, Father Edmund O'Brien came here to serve the Indian school, Sherman Indian School across the street. And the first Mass in the area was said in a classroom over there on an old kitchen table with a classroom full of Indian kids. And that was sort of the beginning. So they finally petitioned the bishop, who at that time was in Monterey, Los Angeles was the diocese. And the bishop said, all right, you can start a parish, but he says, I get to name it. And he said, the name's got to be St. Thomas the Apostle. And people said, well, why? And he says, Doubting Thomas, I doubt you can get anything going in there, because it was the boonies. It was really the boonies back in those days. Where the mall is was walnut groves. There was orange groves around. There was basically nothing. There was dairy cows across the street from church. There was just nothing out here. So we started in a nothing area. And 110 years later, we have a very large parish community. Since we were started to serve the Indian kids across the street, things were very different. Sister Catherine Drexel, who later became St. Catherine Drexel, and the Blessed Sacrament sisters would come out here, and they went from mission to mission of Indian schools and would teach for 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. So she was part of the early days of the parish. The Drexel Foundation money bought the first church and the rectory and supplied everything for $3,000. You can't paint 2 rooms in this place for $3,000 today, but back then that was big money. So there's some older parishioners that actually remember her being here. There was about a 20-25 year period of time from 1903 on that she was here. And they remember her coming through with her sisters to teach the kids their religion classes. There's one funny story. One of the kids, she was doing the sign of the cross, and this kid was a speed artist. You just missed it. And she told the parents, you know, we got to work on this kid. Everything is so fast, the prayers. If he doesn't learn it right, he's got to kill me or make me a saint. So fast forward to when she was made a saint. The family's kidding this guy. He was still alive then, saying, now look what you did. First the poor woman died, and now they made her a saint, and it was because of you going so fast. So there's a lot of stories. The kids remember her, the older parishioners. The one that still remembers her is about 98 years old, and said they remember the sisters coming through for 2 reasons. They taught them religion, but she also baked. Catherine Drexel and the rest of the sisters would bake cookies, and they'd bring apples. Now, we don't think apples are a big deal, but when you live in orange grove country, do you know what you see all the time? Oranges. Apples was a big treat, so if a kid got an apple when they came through, this was a big treat, something to sort of savor. So they got cookies and apples. I don't know if it was bribery to come to school and classes, but it worked that way. So that was part of the early days of the history, and then we started going, developing. During the time of the Second World War, there was an army base in the area that was a training base, so there was an influx of people there. So the church was expanded. In the 40s and early 50s, people started building the school. One of the Franciscans were here by then. He started the school project, but the parish was started by a diocesan priest. The Jesuits were here for many years in the early 20s, and the Franciscans came later on in the 40s, and then it became a diocesan parish in 2000 again. So it's had a long history of various priests and communities serving the parish and building it up. It started as a very small parish, and it's now a very large one, but we do have families that go back to the 1880s in the area. We have one parishioner who is 103 now, I think. She's still alive, and she's one of the Grove families going way back. And I was visiting them a few months ago, and I asked her, I said, what's so great about being 103? And she looked at me and said, well, I've been around here, I know the whole history of the area. And I said, what else is great? And she says, at 103, there is no peer pressure. So we've got some people with a long history and a lot of... All right, a lot. Stop laughing and I'll stop laughing.
Laughing quietly.
So we got, yeah, we have a rich history here and a long tradition here. When you think of 110 years, you think of the thousands and thousands of people that were touched by the parish and walked through the doors of the parish and built the parish up. And you can't put a price tag on the hundreds and thousands of hours of service, of education and ministry, of baptisms. There's thousands and thousands of baptisms, weddings, funerals, gathering of kids for all kinds of things. We've had a school. School is 65 years old now. We've had a school for that much of the parish history. So when you think of all the people and all the lives that were touched by the gospel, by the service, by the ministry, tremendous. And then you talk to the old-timers, and they always have these very personal stories of family gatherings and parties and receptions and how they came together as a community, because it was a very diverse group. It was Grove people, dairy farmers, workers in the Grove. It was families that had a lot of bucks. It was families that sold their property and made a fortune selling their land to the mall and various other places. You had railroad people. You had the military here. It was an Army base first, and then it became March Air Force Base after the war. So we have a very rich mixture of people. You have people from around the country that settled here. Some came to get away from the snow. Some came to because of jobs. Some came to retire. There's just all kinds of history there. But when you look at the parish, starting hardly with anyone here, we've got about 1,600 families now, which is about 5,800 people. So it's a rich, long history. And every generation or every 10 years, it seems like there's a dynamic switch in what the parish does. About 10 years ago, we were getting ready for our 100th. We were refurbishing the buildings that previous generations built. We were doing that for the future. And then all of a sudden, with the economy tanking, we became sort of in Riverside a key place for helping the poor. On any given Sunday, there's about 200 bag lunches made for the homeless. Once a week, there's a team of people at the shelter feeding people. We collected last year about 40,000 pounds of food to give out at the food bank to be used by St. Vincent de Paul. I just got their 6-month report. We serve 3,300 people with St. Vincent de Paul Society with bags of food, groceries, homeless bags, all those kind of things. So we've switched the focus, besides just running a parish, to doing a great deal of community outreach and a great deal of service to the hungry, the poor, the needy. We've helped with a couple funerals. St. Vincent de Paul has reached about 700 people in that 6-month period of time, helping with utility bills, food, counseling, all kinds of things to get them back in the right direction. So the ministry of the parish seems to switch every so often. We have, when you look at volunteers, there's about 500-600 volunteers every week that are doing something, whether it's visiting hospitals, nursing homes, shut-ins, teaching, working, singing, praising, people that do ushering, lectors, Eucharistic ministers, people just keep committees going and on and on. So it's a very different church than 110 years ago, because it was Father O'Brien, and it was Father O'Brien, and it was Father O'Brien, and the Indian kids, and it was Father O'Brien. So it was a very little group. And eventually Sister Catherine Drexel and her gang would come in for 2 weeks, so it was Father O'Brien and the nuns, and it was Father O'Brien and the nuns, and 2 weeks later they were gone. It was back to poor old Father O'Brien. And now we have a very big staff, and just a lot of things going on in a large community. Tomorrow, or Wednesday, the school starts, and the teachers have been here for a week getting ready for that. So there'll be a couple hundred kids on campus running around, plus religious education starting. That's another couple hundred kids here and there. So the numbers are very large. And we still have very close contacts with the Sherman Indian School. Several parishioners work over there and have for generations, their family. We also have people that volunteer and tutor over there. We do some things with the Indians kids. When we have our Christmas concert and program, we use their auditorium that holds about 1,500 people, and the Indian kids come. So there's a great deal of service to them. It's a closed campus now because it's also a therapeutic campus, drug, alcohol abuse, and kind of thing. So they got very strict controls over the kids now that weren't quite there many years ago. So it's a very growing and very dynamic switch from year to year of what the parish is called to do. So that's a little bit of our history. Part of the history is just a lot of generosity and a lot of people donating service and building things up and coming back and redoing things. Nowadays, you would not be allowed to build a school building by volunteers. There'd probably be something wrong with the city, the county, the building permits, but when the place started, a lot of volunteers were there. The original church and the original rectory and everything were mostly adobe buildings, and that was the way things were back in 1903. That wouldn't be allowed now for seismic situations and whatever. You have to have reinforced everything, and so it's seen a great change. There's been a lot of religious that have served the parish, a lot of different priests. Franciscans, Jesuits, diocesan, various dynamics of people serving. We now have some deacons helping in the parish and their spouses. So it's a tremendous change, but as you move on, it's always an upward climb to do a better job and to make sure that we make a difference in the community, not only for our people, but for the larger Riverside community. And when we were founded, we weren't even Riverside, we were Arlington, which was another way of saying they're out in the boonies, they live in Arlington. Because downtown Riverside was probably a half-hour drive by buggy, if not further. And eventually the trolley came out this way, right down Magnolia, and so that brought a lot of civilization to the area. So it's a long, interesting history. And so we're celebrating that history, and we're celebrating 110 years this coming year. And we're celebrating the service and ministry and outreach to a lot of people and the educational things that go on. We keep running out of space, and we figure out a way to make another space, a courtyard, and put a roof over it, and patio furniture, and then we think that's more than enough, and we're still running out of space, so it's a growing area. When the first people built the small church, the rectory, they had a covered patio kind of thing that they used for dinners, socials, and all that kind of stuff, and they thought that was fantastic. We way outgrew that kind of thing, and we proved Monterey and the bishop there extremely wrong. This is not doubting Thomas Parish that we could get started. This is a strong, strong community. So that's a little bit of our history. If you want to read more, go to the website and read the actual facts, but the stories are much better, and the things that happened during the years with various people just working and building. We had a sign in front of the church that fell down eventually, but every time there was an earthquake, it rattled. You could hear it. And instead of rebar in the concrete blocks, they were using, the priests at the time would bring out sandwiches to the workers on Saturday, and beer bottles. And so they used beer bottles and hid them in the concrete block as rebar. So every time there was an earthquake, if you were near the thing, you'd hear it go, tink, 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 all the glass ringing around. So when we took that thing down, we found some very ancient beer bottles hidden in the thing, which no one would own up to. But I think I know some of the culprits in that experience, and the priest that was bringing out the sandwiches and beer. So there's a lot of interesting, fascinating stories that have happened through the years.